I walked into my own kitchen and found my mother and sister hunched over my dining table, with forged documents spread everywhere, practicing my signature like common criminals. When I caught them red-handed, trying to steal my house through fraudulent paperwork, my mother, Margaret, screamed those words that still echo in my mind. "You're dead to us." My sister Jessica looked me straight in the eyes and coldly said she wished I would die in a car accident so they could inherit everything legally. These were the two women I had been financially supporting for 3 years after Dad's death, believing they loved me. My name is Tobias, and 3 years ago, when my father Robert passed away from a sudden heart attack, I inherited our family home in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Denver. The house sat on a corner lot with mature oak trees lining the driveway, a place where childhood memories lived in every room. Dad had worked 2 jobs for decades to pay off that mortgage, and when he left it to me, I felt the weight of his sacrifice and love. At 32, I was earning a solid 6-figure salary as a senior software engineer at a growing tech startup downtown. The work challenged me, building cloud infrastructure solutions that actually mattered. My colleagues respected my expertise, and my manager frequently praised my innovative problem-solving approach. Life felt stable and purposeful, even though the grief of losing Dad still hit me during quiet moments. After the funeral, Mom struggled terribly. She had been a homemaker for most of her marriage, depending on Dad's steady income from his job at the hardware store. The transition to widow's benefits and Social Security left her barely scraping by in a small apartment across town. When she mentioned mounting medical bills from a diabetes diagnosis, I immediately offered to help. $1,500 a month seemed reasonable to ensure she could afford her medications and doctor visits. She cried with gratitude when I made that first bank transfer, telling me what a wonderful son I was. My younger sister Jessica had always been the artistic type, bouncing between different creative pursuits, without ever quite finding her footing. After Dad died, she lost her part-time job at a boutique and struggled to find steady employment. She claimed potential employers discriminated against her unconventional resume, filled with short-term positions in retail and food service. When she faced eviction from her studio apartment, I stepped in with $800 monthly to cover her rent. Jessica hugged me tight and promised she would pay me back once she found something stable. For 3 years, I maintained this routine. Every month, I sent Mom her medical expense money and covered Jessica's rent. I never questioned the amounts or asked for receipts. Family was family, and Dad would have wanted me to take care of them. The house felt too big for just me anyway, with 4 bedrooms and a finished basement that echoed with emptiness. I kept the guest room ready with fresh linens, hoping they would visit more often. The neighborhood appreciated having a young professional maintaining the property. I installed new gutters last spring and repainted the exterior trim in classic white. Mrs. Patterson next door always complimented how well I maintained Dad's flower beds, keeping his prized rose bushes healthy and blooming. The house was worth around $450,000, according to recent comparable sales, sitting pretty in an area where property values steadily climbed each year. I genuinely believed I was being a good son and brother. Every family dinner, every holiday gathering, every random phone call seemed to confirm that we were supporting each other through difficult times. Mom would update me on her health improvements, crediting the medications I helped her afford. Jessica would share stories about job interviews and creative projects, always maintaining optimism about her next opportunity. The Tuesday afternoon when everything changed started ordinarily enough. I had been debugging a particularly stubborn server configuration issue all morning when a migraine began building behind my temples. These headaches occasionally struck without warning, making it impossible to focus on complex code. My supervisor, Janet, encouraged me to head home early and rest, knowing I rarely took sick time. I drove through familiar streets toward home, looking forward to lying down in a dark room until the pain subsided. The autumn weather was perfect, with golden leaves scattered across sidewalks and a crisp breeze carrying the scent of someone's fireplace. These simple moments of appreciating my neighborhood always helped me decompress from work stress. Pulling into my driveway, I noticed something unusual. The front door was unlocked, which struck me as odd, since I distinctly remembered securing it that morning. Maybe Mom and Jessica decided to surprise me with a visit. They both had spare keys, and unexpected family time might be exactly what I needed to chase away this headache. I entered through the front hallway hearing hushed voices coming from the direction of the kitchen. Their tone sounded urgent and secretive, not like normal conversation. As I approached, I could make out Mom's voice, mixed with Jessica's, both speaking in whispers that suggested they did not want to be overheard. Walking into the kitchen, I discovered them huddled around my dining table. Papers were spread everywhere, official-looking documents with seals and signatures. Mom was holding a pen, while Jessica pointed at specific lines on various forms. They both froze when they noticed me standing in the doorway, like children caught sneaking cookies before dinner. That was when I recognized my house deed among the paperwork scattered across the table. My name appeared on multiple documents, but something about the signatures looked wrong. Jessica quickly began gathering papers into her briefcase, while Mom stammered about just looking at family paperwork to help me organize important documents. But I had already seen enough. Scratch paper covered in practiced versions of my signature sat next to official property transfer forms. Someone had been working hard to perfect my handwriting, and the implications made my stomach drop. These were not organizational efforts or innocent family curiosity. This was preparation for fraud. I demanded to see what they were doing with my property documents. Jessica tried to deflect, claiming they were helping me understand legal paperwork that might be confusing. Mom insisted they only wanted to make sure everything was properly filed for tax purposes. Their explanations crumbled under direct questions about why they needed to practice my signature, or why property transfer forms were involved in tax preparation. The truth emerged piece by piece. They had obtained blank deed transfer documents from the county courthouse. Mom had researched the legal requirements for changing property ownership. Jessica had spent weeks studying my signature from old birthday cards and Christmas notes. They planned to forge my consent and transfer the house to Mom without my knowledge or participation. What made it worse was discovering how they had funded this scheme. When I demanded to see bank statements, Mom reluctantly produced records showing the $1,500 I sent monthly for medical expenses had been deposited directly into an investment account. She had not used a single penny for diabetes medications or doctor visits. Instead, she had been building a nest egg while lying to my face about financial hardship and health struggles. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Every grateful phone call thanking me for helping with medical bills had been an act. Every update about her improving health, thanks to medications I helped purchase, had been fiction. For 3 years, I had been funding their preparation to steal my inheritance, while they performed elaborate gratitude for my generosity. The silence in my kitchen felt heavy as concrete, while I stared at the evidence of their deception spread across my table. Mom finally broke the quiet by launching into a defensive explanation about how the house should rightfully belong to her as Dad's widow. She claimed that leaving the property to me instead of her had been unfair from the beginning, that Dad must not have been thinking clearly when he updated his will. Jessica immediately supported Mom's position, arguing that I did not deserve the inheritance since I had never really helped Dad during his lifetime. This accusation stung particularly hard because I had actually contributed to the mortgage payments for the final 5 years of Dad's life. When he struggled with mounting medical bills from his own health issues, I had quietly sent money to help ensure they would not lose the house. Neither woman acknowledged those contributions now. I reminded them of the years I had spent supporting our family financially. The monthly payments to Mom, the rent money for Jessica, the countless smaller expenses I had covered without question or complaint. The house represented Dad's life's work, his sacrifice and dedication to providing security for his family. He had specifically chosen to leave it to me, knowing I would honor his memory and maintain the property he loved. Mom dismissed my financial contributions as the bare minimum any decent son should provide. She claimed that $1,500 monthly was insignificant compared to her emotional investment in maintaining family relationships. Jessica went further, calling me selfish for living alone in a large house, while they struggled in smaller spaces. According to her logic, my father had been wrong to favor me in his estate planning. The argument escalated when I threatened to contact the police about the forgery attempt. Property fraud was a serious felony, and they had assembled enough evidence to face significant criminal charges. Mom's response shocked me with its venom. She screamed that if I involved law enforcement, I would be choosing strangers over family, that I would be dead to them forever. Jessica's reaction was even more chilling. She pulled out her phone and revealed that she had been secretly recording our private conversations for months. These recordings captured moments when I had discussed work, stress, financial concerns, and personal frustrations with people I trusted. She threatened to edit these conversations and share them with my employer, making me appear emotionally unstable and potentially damaging my professional reputation. The scope of their planning became clear when Mom casually mentioned that she had already spoken with a real estate agent named Sarah about listing the property. They had researched market values, discussed pricing strategies, and explored the fastest methods for completing a sale. This conversation had happened weeks ago, confirming that today's forgery attempt was not a spontaneous decision, but part of a calculated, long-term strategy. Jessica then admitted they had been working on this plan for 8 months. They had researched legal loopholes that might allow them to claim the house through adverse possession or elder abuse allegations. They had consulted with different attorneys about challenging Dad's will, though apparently no lawyer was willing to take their case without stronger evidence of mental incapacity or undue influence. During those same 8 months, Jessica had been telling our neighbors that I was planning to move cross-country for a new job opportunity. She had planted seeds, suggesting that the house would soon be available for purchase, preparing the community for a transition they expected to control. Mrs. Patterson had even mentioned to me in passing that she hoped the new owners would maintain Dad's beautiful garden, not realizing she was discussing a fiction Jessica had created. Mom produced a collection of fake medical bills she had carefully created using home design software and public information about local healthcare providers. These fabricated documents showed expensive treatments and medications that never existed, supporting her claims about needing financial assistance for diabetes care. The attention to detail was impressive and disturbing, including realistic medical terminology and accurate insurance coding. Every family interaction suddenly took on new meaning. Each holiday dinner, where they expressed gratitude for my support, had been performance art designed to maintain access to my finances. Each birthday phone call, filled with warm wishes, had been calculated manipulation to preserve their long-term plan. Each random visit to my house had provided opportunities to gather information, study my habits, and prepare for eventual fraud. The most devastating revelation came when Jessica looked directly into my eyes and spoke with complete sincerity about wishing I would die in a car accident. She explained that my death would eliminate the legal complications surrounding the property transfer. An inheritance through natural causes would be clean and simple compared to the forgery and family conflict they were currently navigating. She did not speak these words in anger or momentary frustration. Her tone was matter-of-fact, almost businesslike, as if she were discussing weather or grocery shopping. The casual way she wished for my death demonstrated how completely she had dehumanized me in her mind. I was no longer her brother, but simply an obstacle preventing her from accessing what she considered rightfully theirs. I realized that every expression of love or gratitude I had received from them over the past 3 years had been carefully constructed lies. They had never intended for me to discover their plan until after the house deed was legally transferred and the property was sold. By then, challenging the fraud would have been exponentially more difficult and expensive, possibly requiring years of litigation to resolve. Mom concluded our confrontation by demanding that I choose between family loyalty and property ownership. She presented this as a reasonable either-or decision as if her criminal behavior was equivalent to my legal ownership of an inherited house. In her mind, my refusal to voluntarily surrender the property proved that I cared more about money than maintaining relationships with the women who raised me. The kitchen where we stood had been the heart of our family home when Dad was alive. He had installed new cabinets the year before he died, wanting to leave Mom with an updated space she could enjoy. The irony of standing in that same kitchen, while his widow and younger daughter plotted to steal his final gift to me, felt like a violation of his memory and sacrifice. The following morning brought a series of phone calls that revealed the true extent of their manipulation campaign. Before I had even finished my first cup of coffee, Uncle Raymond was on my phone, demanding that I respect my mother's wishes and stop being selfish about family property. His tone carried disappointment and genuine anger, as if I had committed some terrible offense against our family values. Over the next several hours, I received similar calls from cousins, aunts, and other relatives I had not spoken to in months. Each caller had received a different version of the same basic story from Mom. I was greedily refusing to help a struggling widow and unemployed sister hoarding a large house while they faced homelessness and medical bankruptcy. The details varied, but the theme remained consistent across every conversation. According to Mom's version of events, I had become cold and calculating after Dad's death, prioritizing money over family relationships. She told Aunt Linda that I was charging her rent to visit her own childhood home. She informed Cousin Mark that I had refused to help with Jessica's job search because I wanted to keep her financially dependent. Each lie was crafted to paint me as the villain in our family drama. The most painful call came from Uncle Raymond, Dad's younger brother, who had always been a mentor figure during my childhood. He explained that Mom had contacted him in tears the previous evening, describing how I had threatened to call the police over a simple misunderstanding about paperwork. She claimed I had accused her of trying to steal my house when she was actually trying to help me organize important documents. Raymond's voice carried genuine concern when he suggested I might be experiencing some kind of emotional breakdown. According to Mom's account, I had become paranoid and suspicious, seeing criminal intent in innocent family assistance. She had expressed worry about my mental stability, wondering if the stress of Dad's death and work responsibilities were finally overwhelming my ability to think clearly. What made these conversations particularly devastating was recognizing how skillfully Mom had constructed her false narrative. Each family member received information tailored to their specific relationship with me and their knowledge of our family dynamics. She knew exactly which emotional buttons to push, with each person crafting lies that would be believable based on their limited perspective on our situation. By midday, I felt completely isolated from my extended family. People who had respected and supported me throughout my life now viewed me as unstable and potentially dangerous. The relationships I had counted on for emotional support during this crisis had been systematically poisoned by a woman who understood exactly how to manipulate family loyalty for her personal gain. That afternoon brought an even more disturbing discovery when I decided to review my financial records more carefully. Logging into my banking portal, I noticed several security alerts I had previously ignored as routine notifications. These alerts showed unauthorized attempts to access my accounts from unfamiliar IP addresses and devices I did not recognize. Someone had been trying to gain access to my financial information for weeks. The failed login attempts came from locations throughout Denver, suggesting they were using public computers at libraries or coffee shops to avoid detection. Each attempt failed because they lacked my two-factor authentication codes, but the persistent efforts revealed sophisticated planning and patience. Digging deeper into my credit monitoring service, I discovered that someone had recently requested copies of my credit report from all 3 major bureaus. These requests appeared legitimate on the surface, coming through established channels that consumers typically use to monitor their financial health. However, I had not initiated any of these requests, meaning someone else was using my personal information to gather detailed financial data. The most shocking discovery came when I contacted my credit card companies to inquire about recent account activity. Two different companies informed me that applications for new credit cards had been submitted using my name and social security number within the past month. Both applications were rejected due to signature inconsistencies, but the attempts revealed that someone had access to all my personal identification information. Jessica had clearly been gathering this data during her visits to my house over the past several months. I remembered her frequently asking to use my laptop to check her email or browse social media while visiting. During those sessions, she must have been photographing sensitive documents, copying passwords, and installing software to monitor my online activity. A thorough search of my home office revealed that several important documents were missing from their usual storage locations. My Social Security card, passport, birth certificate, and various financial statements had been removed and replaced so carefully that I had not noticed their absence. Jessica had systematically stolen every piece of identification she would need to impersonate me for financial purposes. The sophistication of her approach impressed me, even while it horrified me. She had researched identity theft techniques extensively, understanding which documents and information would be most valuable for accessing my accounts and establishing fraudulent credit lines. This was not amateur criminal behavior, but carefully planned financial crime. Even more disturbing was discovering that someone had attempted to secure a loan against my house without my knowledge or consent. The mortgage application was submitted to a small local lender, known for quick approvals and minimal documentation requirements. The application claimed I needed emergency funds for medical expenses related to a family crisis. Fortunately, the loan application was rejected when the lender attempted to verify my employment and discovered discrepancies in the submitted paperwork. My employer had no record of authorizing the salary verification documents included with the application, and the signatures on various forms did not match their samples of my authentic signature. This attempted loan fraud revealed the full scope of their criminal conspiracy. They were not just planning to steal my house through forged deed transfers. They were also trying to extract equity from the property through fraudulent borrowing, potentially leaving me responsible for loan payments on money I never received, while simultaneously losing ownership of the collateral securing those loans. The realization that Jessica had been systematically committing identity theft for months, while I welcomed her into my home and supported her financially, felt like a violation of the deepest kind of trust. Every casual conversation about my work, every innocent question about my financial planning, every friendly request to use my computer had been part of a calculated effort to gather information for criminal purposes. Mom's role in encouraging and facilitating Jessica's crimes made her behavior even more reprehensible. She was not just a desperate widow making poor choices under financial pressure. She was an active participant in a criminal conspiracy that involved multiple felonies and could have destroyed my financial stability for years to come. I began to understand that their plan extended far beyond simply stealing my house. They intended to destroy my financial life completely, leaving me unable to challenge their theft while they enjoyed the proceeds of their crimes. The cruelty of this approach seemed designed not just to enrich themselves, but to punish me for whatever perceived slights had motivated their hatred. The harassment campaign began 3 days after our kitchen confrontation and quickly escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. Mom started appearing at my workplace during lunch hours, positioning herself in the lobby where colleagues and clients would see her crying. She told anyone who would listen that her successful son had abandoned his sick mother, refusing to help pay for life-saving diabetes medications, while hoarding family property. The performance was masterfully executed. She dressed in her oldest clothes, emphasizing her appearance as a struggling widow, barely making ends meet. Her tears appeared genuine to observers who had no context about our actual situation. She carried a worn photo of Dad in his military uniform, using his memory to add emotional weight to her fabricated story about family abandonment and medical neglect. My supervisor, Janet, pulled me aside after Mom's third appearance, expressing concern about how family stress might be affecting my work performance. Several colleagues had approached Janet with questions about the sobbing woman in the lobby, who claimed to be my mother. The situation created uncomfortable workplace dynamics that threatened my professional reputation and, potentially, my job security. Meanwhile, Jessica launched her own attack on social media, systematically contacting friends and acquaintances with disturbing messages about my mental state and character. She created a compelling narrative about witnessing my gradual transformation from a loving family member into someone consumed by greed and paranoia following Dad's death. Her messages included carefully edited screenshots of text conversations we had never had using publicly available apps to create fake phone numbers that appeared to be mine. These fabricated conversations showed me allegedly threatening family members and making disturbing comments about money being more important than relationships. Anyone receiving these messages would naturally be concerned about my stability and moral character. Jessica's social media campaign was particularly effective because she mixed real information about our family with manufactured evidence of my supposed misconduct. People who knew me could verify basic facts about Dad's death and the inheritance, making her lies more credible by association with verifiable truths. The psychological pressure of fighting these attacks on multiple fronts while maintaining normal work responsibilities began taking a serious toll on my mental and physical health. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering which friend or colleague had been contacted with lies about my character. Sleep became difficult as I worried about what new fabrication might surface the following day. The situation reached a crisis point when I discovered fresh damage to my car in the workplace parking lot. Someone had used a key or similar sharp object to carve the word "thief" deep into the driver's side door. The vandalism was positioned where it would be clearly visible to anyone passing by, serving as both property damage and public humiliation. When I reported the vandalism to building security, they reviewed parking lot cameras and identified Jessica approaching my car during lunch hour. The footage clearly showed her looking around to ensure she was not being observed before deliberately damaging my vehicle. However, when I confronted her about the vandalism, she denied any involvement and suggested I was becoming paranoid enough to damage my own property for attention. Her gaslighting technique was sophisticated and disturbing. She expressed concern about my mental health, while simultaneously questioning whether the stress of our family situation was causing me to lose touch with reality. According to Jessica's interpretation, I was so desperate to make myself appear victimized that I would vandalize my own car and then blame family members for crimes they did not commit. The following week brought an escalation that crossed into genuinely dangerous territory. I was working late at the office when two police officers arrived, asking to speak with me about a domestic violence complaint. Officer Williams explained that my mother had filed a report claiming I had threatened her with physical violence during a family disagreement. The officers were professional, but serious, as they questioned me about allegations that I had grabbed Mom's arm, hard enough to leave bruises, pushed her against a wall, and threatened to hurt her if she did not stay away from family property. According to their report, the incident occurred during a confrontation at my house, where I became violently angry about her attempts to help organize estate paperwork. I was stunned by the false accusations, but cooperated fully with the investigation. The officers searched my house and interviewed me for over 2 hours about family dynamics and recent conflicts. They took photos of rooms where the alleged violence supposedly occurred and collected contact information for potential witnesses who could verify my whereabouts during the time in question. What made the situation even more alarming was the evidence Mom had provided to support her claims. She showed officers text messages that appeared to come from my phone number, containing explicit threats about what would happen if she continued interfering with my property. These messages included language I would never use and threats I would never make, but they appeared authentic to anyone lacking technical knowledge about message spoofing. The investigation process was humiliating and terrifying. Even though the officers treated me fairly, I could see their concern about domestic violence allegations that seemed supported by documentation and witness statements. Jessica provided a sworn statement corroborating Mom's story claiming she had observed my violent tendencies, developing over several months following Dad's death. Their coordinated lies created a narrative where I was an adult child, struggling with grief and financial pressure, gradually becoming unstable and potentially dangerous to family members who challenged my control over inherited property. To outside observers unfamiliar with the identity theft and fraud attempts, this story probably seemed more plausible than the truth about their criminal conspiracy. I realized I needed immediate legal representation to protect myself against these escalating false accusations. The attorney I consulted, David Chen, explained that domestic violence allegations create serious legal jeopardy, even when they are completely fabricated. The legal system errs on the side of protecting potential victims, which means false accusers often receive the benefit of the doubt during initial investigations. David warned me that Mom and Jessica appeared to understand the legal system well enough to maximize damage through their accusations. They had researched which types of claims would be taken most seriously by law enforcement and had prepared evidence packages designed to support their false narrative. This level of preparation suggested they had been planning the legal aspects of their attack as carefully as the financial fraud attempts. The mounting legal fees for defending against fabricated charges added financial pressure to an already stressful situation. David's services were expensive, but absolutely necessary to prevent the false accusations from resulting in criminal charges that could destroy my career and personal life. Every dollar spent on legal defense was money that could not be used for other purposes, creating additional strain that Mom and Jessica had probably anticipated. As I sat in David's office reviewing the police reports and fabricated evidence, I realized that traditional defensive strategies would not be sufficient to protect myself from their systematic attack. They had researched the legal system thoroughly and understood how to use it as a weapon against me. Simply proving my innocence would not stop them from filing new false reports or escalating their harassment campaign in other ways. The restraining order application Mom filed represented the next phase of their legal warfare. If granted, it would prevent me from entering my own house and potentially require me to surrender my keys to law enforcement. They had calculated that even temporary success with a restraining order would give them physical access to my property, while I was legally prohibited from defending it. I finally understood that they viewed our conflict as total warfare, where any tactic was acceptable if it helped them achieve their goal of stealing my inheritance. They were not simply desperate family members making poor choices under financial pressure. They were committed criminals willing to destroy my life completely, if that was what it took to access the money they believed they deserved. Sitting in David's law office reviewing the evidence against me, I came to a stark realization that conventional approaches to this conflict were doomed to fail. Mom and Jessica had researched the legal system extensively and understood how to use it against me more effectively than I could use it to protect myself. Every defensive move I made seemed to provide them with new opportunities to escalate their attacks. David confirmed my growing suspicion that fighting false accusations through traditional legal channels would be both expensive and uncertain. Even with clear evidence of their fraud and perjury, the process of clearing my name could take years and cost tens of thousands of dollars. Meanwhile, they would continue filing new false reports and expanding their harassment campaign, potentially destroying my career and personal relationships in the process. That was when David mentioned something that shifted my entire perspective on the situation. As the legal owner of my property, I had the right to sell it and relocate without providing advance notice to anyone, including family members, who might have emotional attachments to the house. There was no legal requirement to consider their feelings or give them opportunities to interfere with my decision-making. The idea of disappearing completely had never occurred to me before that moment, but David's casual comment about my legal rights sparked a revolutionary thought process. Instead of continuing to defend myself against their attacks, I could simply remove myself from their reach entirely. They wanted to drive me away from my family and community. I could grant their wish more thoroughly than they ever imagined. That evening, I began researching the practical aspects of executing a complete disappearance. The internet provided detailed guides for people seeking to start fresh in new locations, whether they were escaping abusive relationships, entering witness protection programs, or simply choosing to reinvent themselves in different environments. I learned that Colorado was a one-party consent state for recording phone conversations, meaning I could legally document future interactions with Mom and Jessica without their knowledge or permission. These recordings could provide evidence of their fraud attempts and false accusations that would be admissible in criminal proceedings, giving law enforcement everything they would need to pursue charges. Over the following days, I systematically gathered evidence, while they remained unaware that I was preparing for anything beyond continued legal defense. During phone conversations, where Mom repeated her lies about medical expenses, or Jessica discussed her fabricated concerns about my mental health, I captured their words digitally. Their confidence in their deception made them careless about admitting to facts that contradicted their official stories. The recordings revealed the full scope of their criminal thinking. Mom casually discussed using my monthly payments for investments rather than medical care, laughing about how easy it was to fool me with fake doctor bills. Jessica bragged about successfully accessing my personal information during family visits, describing her techniques for photographing documents and installing monitoring software on my devices. Most importantly, they both acknowledged that their domestic violence accusations were fabricated attempts to remove me from my property. Jessica explicitly stated that getting a restraining order would give them time to complete the house transfer, while I was legally prevented from interfering. These admissions provided ironclad evidence of perjury and conspiracy to commit fraud. With solid evidence secured, I began implementing the practical aspects of my disappearance plan. The first step involved arranging an off-market sale of my house to a cash buyer who could complete the transaction quickly without traditional financing delays. A real estate investor I found through discreet professional networks was willing to pay $420,000 for a rapid closing with minimal paperwork. The below-market price was worth accepting to ensure speed and confidentiality. Traditional sales involve public records, real estate agent communications, and potential buyer interactions that Mom and Jessica could monitor or interfere with. An all-cash sale to an investor eliminated these complications while providing me with liquid assets that would be impossible for them to trace or access. While the house sale progressed, I systematically closed my local financial accounts and transferred assets to offshore banking institutions that prioritized privacy and security. These transfers were completely legal for an American citizen, but they placed my money beyond the reach of family members who might attempt future fraud or legal challenges to my financial independence. I submitted my resignation to my employer with a carefully crafted explanation about needing to relocate immediately due to a family emergency that required my presence in another state. My supervisor Janet expressed concern, but accepted my decision, especially given the visible stress I had been experiencing from the ongoing family conflict. The company agreed to provide positive employment references for future job opportunities. Canceling utilities. Internet service, mail delivery, and other local services required coordination to ensure everything would be disconnected simultaneously on my departure date. I arranged for mail forwarding to David's law office, instead of providing a new personal address maintaining privacy, while ensuring I would receive any important communications. The most emotionally difficult aspect of disappearing was destroying my social media presence and severing ties with friends who had nothing to do with the family conflict. However, Jessica's manipulation campaign had already contaminated many of these relationships, and maintaining them would provide avenues for Mom and Jessica to track my new location or continue their harassment. I researched legal name change procedures in states with privacy-friendly policies and began the paperwork to establish a new identity that would be much harder for them to trace. This process would take several months to complete, but it would provide long-term protection against future attempts to locate or harass me in my new life. The timing of my departure was carefully calculated to maximize the psychological impact on Mom and Jessica, while minimizing their ability to interfere with my plans. They had mentioned planning a surprise visit to my house for the weekend, intending to make another attempt at reconciliation that would probably involve new manipulation tactics or fraud attempts. I scheduled my flight to Seattle for the Friday morning before their planned visit, ensuring they would arrive at an empty house with no warning about my departure. The note I left on the kitchen table was brief and direct. "You wanted me gone. Your wish is granted. No forwarding address, no explanation of my plans, no opportunities for final manipulation attempts." Thursday evening, I walked through my empty house one final time, remembering Dad's presence in every room, but feeling no sadness about leaving. The place had been contaminated by Mom, and Jessica's betrayal transformed from a sanctuary of family memories into a crime scene where people who claimed to love me had plotted my destruction. My flight to Seattle departed at 6 in the morning, carrying me toward a completely new life that Mom and Jessica would never be able to touch. As the plane lifted off from Denver International Airport, I felt lighter than I had in months. Their wish for me to disappear was coming true, but not in any way they could have anticipated or controlled. Mom and Jessica arrived at my house on Saturday morning, expecting to find me home and vulnerable to whatever new manipulation strategy they had prepared during the week. Instead, they discovered an empty structure with utility services, disconnected, all furniture removed, and a large "sold" sign planted prominently in the front yard. According to Mrs. Patterson, who later described the scene to David's office, both women stood on my front porch, screaming and pounding on the locked door for nearly 20 minutes before accepting that I was genuinely gone. They used their spare keys to enter the house, finding it completely vacant, except for the note I had left on the kitchen counter. The panic that followed was immediate and intense. Mom called my old phone number repeatedly, reaching a disconnected service message that offered no forwarding information. Jessica attempted to contact my former employer, learning only that I had resigned for personal reasons and left no contact details with human resources. Their first instinct was to contact the police with claims that I had been kidnapped or murdered by unknown criminals who stole my property and disposed of my body. This strategy backfired when Officer Williams, who had investigated their previous false domestic violence claims, recognized their names and treated their new allegations with appropriate skepticism. The police investigation into my supposed disappearance lasted exactly 1 day. Public records showed the house had been sold legally to a legitimate buyer, with proper documentation and signatures verified by licensed notaries. My employer confirmed that I had resigned voluntarily after giving appropriate notice. There was no evidence of foul play, criminal activity, or anything other than a man choosing to relocate and start fresh somewhere else. Officer Williams later told David that Mom and Jessica's behavior during the investigation raised red flags about their credibility. They seemed more concerned about locating my new address than ensuring my safety, asking repeatedly about forwarding information and demanding access to records that would help them track my movements. Their questions focused on financial assets rather than personal well-being. The financial impact of my disappearance hit them within weeks. Mom could not afford her apartment rent without the $1,500 monthly that had been automatically deposited into her account for 3 years. Her landlord began eviction proceedings when the October payment failed to arrive, and she had no savings to cover the shortfall, since all my money had been invested, rather than spent on medical expenses. Jessica faced the same crisis when her rent support disappeared simultaneously. Neither woman had developed backup plans for supporting themselves independently, having grown accustomed to my financial contributions as reliable income they could count on indefinitely. Their assumption that I would always be available to exploit had prevented them from building genuine financial stability. The extended family members who had been manipulated into taking sides against me began learning the truth about our situation when Mom started desperately calling them for money. Uncle Raymond was the first to realize he had been deceived when Mom called sobbing and begging for $1,500 to cover her rent admitting that her medical expense story had been fabricated. Aunt Linda received a similar call from Jessica, who explained that she was facing homelessness because her unstable brother had suddenly stopped paying her rent without warning. When Linda asked why Jessica could not support herself with employment income, the conversation revealed that Jessica had been deliberately avoiding stable work for years while living off my support. One by one, the relatives who had condemned me for being selfish and greedy began understanding that they had been fed false information designed to isolate me from family support during Mom and Jessica's criminal activities. The realization that they had participated in psychological abuse based on lies created guilt and anger that further damaged Mom and Jessica's remaining family relationships. Mom's desperation led her to contact my former employer, directly claiming to be worried about my mental health and asking for help locating me for a family intervention. This phone call backfired spectacularly when Janet explained that company policy prohibited sharing employee information with anyone, regardless of claimed family relationships, and that my resignation had appeared completely normal and professional. Jessica's attempts to continue her social media harassment campaign also collapsed when my complete disappearance made her posts look increasingly unhinged. Friends who had initially been concerned about her warnings regarding my mental health began questioning why she was obsessively posting about someone who was no longer part of her life. Her credibility evaporated as her behavior appeared more stalking than legitimate family concern. The criminal investigation that David had initiated based on my recorded evidence proceeded regardless of my physical absence from Colorado. Financial crimes investigators had everything they needed to build cases against both women for identity, theft, fraud, and perjury. My disappearance actually simplified the prosecution process by eliminating any appearance that I was using criminal charges for personal revenge in a family dispute. Detective Sarah Martinez from the Financial Crimes Unit contacted David's office to report that Jessica's credit card applications using my stolen identity constituted federal felonies with mandatory minimum sentences. The evidence I had provided included digital forensics, showing exactly how she had accessed my personal information and created fraudulent documents for her applications. Mom's fake medical bills represented wire fraud when combined with her interstate banking activities related to the investment account, where she deposited my money under false pretenses. The combination of state and federal charges created significant legal jeopardy for both women, with potential prison sentences that reflected the serious nature of their crimes. Their inability to afford competent legal representation compounded their legal problems exponentially. The public defenders assigned to their cases were overworked and inexperienced with complex financial crimes. These attorneys lacked the resources and expertise necessary to mount effective defenses against the overwhelming evidence David had helped me compile. Mom's landlord completed the eviction process 6 weeks after my departure, leaving her homeless and dependent on the charity of relatives who now understood how she had manipulated family relationships for criminal purposes. The irony of her situation was not lost on Uncle Raymond, who offered temporary assistance while making clear that her behavior had permanently damaged their relationship. Jessica lost her part-time retail job when her employer learned about the pending criminal charges during a routine background check update. Few companies were willing to hire someone facing federal charges for identity theft and fraud, leaving her unemployed and unemployable while awaiting trial. The investigation also revealed additional victims of Jessica's identity theft activities. She had attempted similar crimes against 2 former roommates and an ex-boyfriend, suggesting a pattern of financial predation that extended beyond our family conflict. These discoveries strengthened the prosecution's case, while exposing Jessica as a repeat offender, deserving of enhanced sentencing. As winter approached, both women found themselves facing the consequences of their choices without the financial safety net they had stolen from me for years. The house they had tried to steal was occupied by new owners who had no knowledge of or interest in their claims. The money they had expected to inherit was beyond their reach in accounts they could not access. Their plan to drive me away from family and community had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. But the victory felt hollow when they realized that my absence eliminated their primary source of financial support and left them vulnerable to prosecution for crimes they had committed while I was present to document their activities. 6 months after my disappearance from Denver, David called my new Seattle phone number with news about the criminal cases against Mom and Jessica. The evidence I had gathered proved overwhelming in court, leading to plea agreements that avoided lengthy trials while ensuring appropriate consequences for their crimes. Mom pleaded guilty to wire fraud and conspiracy charges, in exchange for a sentence of 18 months, supervised probation, and full restitution of the money she had stolen from me over 3 years. The judge emphasized that her age and lack of criminal history prevented a harsher sentence, but made clear that any violation of probation terms would result in immediate imprisonment. The restitution order required Mom to repay $45,000, plus interest and penalties, representing every penny I had sent for fabricated medical expenses. However, she had no assets or income source capable of satisfying this debt, meaning the financial judgment would follow her for the rest of her life, while providing me little practical recovery. Jessica's case resulted in more serious consequences due to the federal identity theft charges and evidence of repeat offenses against multiple victims. She received a 2-year prison sentence, followed by 3 years of supervised probation with similar restitution requirements for the money she had helped steal and the damages from her various fraud attempts. The federal sentencing guidelines treated Jessica's crimes seriously because identity theft creates lasting damage that extends far beyond immediate financial losses. Her systematic approach to gathering personal information and creating fraudulent documents demonstrated sophisticated criminal thinking that warranted deterrent punishment to protect future potential victims. Both women were also required to pay substantial court costs and legal fees associated with their prosecution, adding thousands of dollars to their financial obligations. The criminal justice system recovered its costs from offenders whenever possible, ensuring that taxpayers did not bear the full burden of investigating and prosecuting financial crimes. Officer Williams contacted David's office to provide a formal apology for the initial response to Mom's false domestic violence allegations. The investigation had revealed fabricated evidence and perjured testimony that wasted significant police resources while creating unnecessary trauma for everyone involved. The department implemented new verification procedures for domestic violence claims to prevent similar manipulation in the future. The restraining order applications Mom had filed were dismissed when the court learned they were based on fabricated evidence and false testimony. The judge expressed frustration about the misuse of domestic violence protection systems for personal vendettas, noting that false claims undermined legitimate victims seeking protection from real threats. Uncle Raymond sent a heartfelt letter to David's office, requesting that it be forwarded to me wherever I had relocated. He acknowledged being manipulated into condemning me without investigating the truth and expressed deep regret for participating in Mom's psychological warfare campaign. His apology included an offer to testify about her deceptive behavior if additional legal proceedings became necessary. Several other family members sent similar messages through David's office, recognizing that they had been deceived about our family situation and expressing remorse for their role in isolating me during the crisis. These apologies helped confirm that rational people could recognize the truth when presented with facts rather than emotional manipulation. Meanwhile, my new life in Seattle had exceeded every expectation I had held when making the decision to disappear completely. The city's thriving technology sector provided numerous opportunities for someone with my software engineering background, and I quickly established a successful consulting practice, serving local startups and established companies. My apartment overlooked Puget Sound, providing daily views of ferries, sailboats, and Olympic mountains that reminded me constantly of the beauty possible when toxicity is removed from one's environment. The peaceful morning routine of watching sunrise over the water replaced the anxiety and hypervigilance that had characterized my final months in Denver. The consulting business grew rapidly through referrals from satisfied clients who appreciated my technical expertise and professional reliability. Without the constant stress of family manipulation and legal threats, my work quality improved dramatically, leading to premium project rates and a waiting list of companies seeking my services. More importantly, I had begun building authentic relationships with neighbors and colleagues who knew nothing about family drama or property disputes. These connections formed naturally around shared interests and mutual respect rather than financial dependency or emotional manipulation. The difference between healthy relationships and toxic ones became crystal clear through comparison. I joined a local hiking club that explored the Cascade Mountains most weekends, connecting with outdoors enthusiasts who valued adventure and environmental stewardship. These activities provided physical exercise and social interaction, while creating positive memories in spectacular natural settings that healed psychological damage from years of family conflict. The volunteer work I began at a downtown homeless shelter proved particularly meaningful, allowing me to help people who genuinely needed assistance while gaining perspective on my own situation. Serving meals and organizing clothing donations reminded me that many people faced far worse circumstances than family betrayal, and provided opportunities to make positive differences in my community. Through therapy sessions with Dr. Lisa, a trauma specialist who understood family betrayal dynamics, I processed the emotional aftermath of discovering that people I loved had been systematically planning my destruction. These sessions helped me understand that their behavior reflected their character limitations rather than my failures as a son or brother. Dr. Lisa explained that family members who engage in financial fraud and emotional manipulation often view their relatives as resources to be exploited, rather than people deserving of love and respect. The sophisticated planning Mom and Jessica invested in their criminal activities demonstrated that their affection had always been performance designed to maintain access to my financial support. The most surprising development in my new life was meeting Sarah, a graphic designer who shared my appreciation for authentic communication and genuine human connection. Our relationship developed slowly and naturally built on trust and mutual respect rather than financial dependency or family obligation. Sarah's perspective on my family situation provided validation that my decision to disappear had been necessary self-preservation rather than abandonment or revenge. She understood immediately that people willing to commit identity theft and file false police reports represented genuine threats that required extreme protective measures. Dating someone who had never experienced severe family dysfunction helped me recognize how abnormal my previous situation had been. Sarah's relationship with her parents involved healthy boundaries, honest communication, and mutual support without manipulation or exploitation. Her family welcomed me warmly while respecting my privacy about past experiences. As I reflected on the complete transformation of my life over 12 months, several profound realizations emerged about family loyalty and personal responsibility. The most important lesson was understanding that blood relationships do not automatically create obligations to tolerate abuse or criminal behavior from people who share genetic material. True family relationships are built on love, respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. When family members consistently harm you while demanding loyalty and support, they are exploiting cultural expectations about family bonds to continue their exploitation. Walking away from toxic family members is not betrayal. It is self-preservation and the foundation for building healthier relationships. The courage required to start completely over in a new location with no connections or safety net taught me about personal resilience I had never realized I possessed. Facing the unknown felt less frightening than continuing to live under constant threat from people who claim to love me, while systematically working to destroy my peace and security. My disappearance was not revenge against Mom and Jessica, but rescue of myself from their ongoing criminal activities and psychological manipulation. They had wished me gone, and granting that wish allowed me to discover who I could become when not constantly defending myself against family members who viewed my success as something they deserved to steal. The money I lost to their fraud and the legal costs of defending myself were ultimately worthwhile investments in purchasing freedom from relationships that were destroying my mental health and personal growth. No amount of money is worth tolerating systematic abuse from people who will never change their fundamental character or respect your right to live peacefully. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is permission to be happy without needing approval or understanding from people who have proven themselves unworthy of influence over your emotions or decisions. My family's reaction to losing access to my financial support revealed their true priorities and confirmed that my departure was the correct choice. Building a new life in Seattle proved that it is possible to recover from even the deepest family betrayals when you are willing to prioritize your own well-being over maintaining relationships that consistently cause harm. The happiness and peace I discovered after removing toxic influences validated every difficult decision involved in starting over. The story of my disappearance demonstrates that sometimes loving yourself requires walking away from people who claim to love you, but consistently demonstrate the opposite through their actions. True healing begins when you stop accepting treatment you would never tolerate from strangers simply because it comes from family members. Have you ever had to choose between maintaining family relationships and protecting your own well-being? Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most beautiful new chapters in life. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to prioritize your own peace and happiness. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope you find the courage to write your own ending when life demands difficult choices.